Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here with a Barbarian Bleed build guide. This build I think is going to be incredibly strong for leveling, and this guide should take you all the way from level 1 all the way up to the end of World Tier 3 as we get into the end game with that second capstone dungeon. I've planned out a bunch of aspects that come off the codex. I planned out a skill tree for you. I have Paragon. We pretty much have everything you're going to need. But if you want to have some sort of cheat sheet up, all you have to do is there'll be a link in the description that sends you over to the Mobalytics website, and there will be a cheat sheet just like we have here for our Bone Spear Necromancer, where you're able to see all of the stuff, including like stats, just like general ideas of things. There's a leveling thing here, and it's just a really good setup, and I highly recommend checking this out. But yeah, let's hop right into the build. So for aspects, we are only putting aspects on our build for leveling that come out of the codex because these are the only ones that we can guarantee. It's also important to note that we are using Rend. Rend is our primary damage dealer in this build, and this always uses your two-handed slashing weapon, so we will never put a aspect onto our two-handed slashing weapon unless it's like right before we go up a world tier, because we want to be able to very easily replace our two-handed slashing weapon. It is our primary damage dealer throughout the entire build. And why do I say this? Because like if you have a like 100 item power sword, but it has nothing on it, no legendary aspect, and you drop a like 200 item power sword, you can just equip the new sword, no problem, or new axe or whatever. But if you have a legendary power on here that's giving you damage, it like messes with the equation of like, is it really worth to change? I'm not really sure. It's just better to be like, oh, higher item level will give you way more damage while you're leveling up. Just keep replacing them as you go. Now, the other aspects that we're going to talk about here, Aspect of Might makes it so that your basic skills give you a damage reduction, which I think is really strong. Iron Blood aspect is insane for Barbarian. This gives you damage reduction for every nearby enemy, and every enemy that's like near you will be bleeding as long as you've hit them, and this is just very strong DR. Aspect of Anemia makes it so that when you deal direct damage to bleeding enemies, you have a chance to stun them. This isn't necessarily super great, but this is something that you can definitely use with this build. Aspect of Disobedience is also very, very strong. This might even get nerfed sometime soon because this just increases your armor by so much. And I see like basically every build using it. And another good option would be Aspect of Tempering Blows, which is after swapping weapons 6 times, you gain a flat amount of Fortify. If you haven't seen my Fortify video in Diablo University, highly recommend checking that out. And we'll be swapping weapons quite a bit in this. Ghostwalker aspect is absolutely bonkers too. When you get unstoppable, it makes you move faster, and we'll be getting unstoppable from Rallying Cry. So this basically makes it for 10 seconds after hitting Rallying Cry, get 10% increased movement speed. Pretty nuts. For other aspects here, we have Aspect of the Umbral, which makes it so that when you get primary resource whenever you crowd control an enemy, you'll be crowd controlling basically anything you hit with bleeds. Echoing Fury gives us more fury from just shouting. We have 2 shouts. This is very, very useful. And then Aspect of the Expectant, I think, is probably one of the more important codex powers to get on your stuff. We're putting this on the amulet for the 50% boost, and this makes it so that attacking with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill by up to 30%, and this will be 45%, I believe, if it's on your necklace. Now, we also have other aspects here, but the ones that are on your weapons, like if you find a weapon that has like way better stats or is like much higher level, you should probably consider just replacing your weapons. Things like Edge Masters, though, do very well once you have a lot of fury. And like if you just slap this on your bludgeoning weapon, we're not really going to be using our bludgeoning weapon too much in this build, but we are definitely using it a little bit. But if you have a really good like statted out one, you just slap an Edge Masters on there, you could probably roll with that for quite a long time. Aspect of Retribution, we don't really stun necessarily, but this is a huge multiplier, especially against bosses when you stagger them, because they count as all crowd control, so that would be a free 20% here. And then Rapid Aspect gives you more basic attack speed. And if I was to go and gamble for any particular aspect, it would probably be the shout aspect of Bold Chieftain. This is just absolutely insane. It's going to reduce the cooldown of all of your shouts based off how many nearby enemies there are, and that is very helpful. So it'd just be gambling rings nonstop. For gems, obviously Amethyst in the weapon for damage over time. rubies or sapphires in the armor for life or damage reduction while fortified. And then I recommend skulls in your jewelry because I think armor is just a little bit too strong while leveling compared to the other options. Probably move over to diamonds afterwards. For the technique slot here, there's a bunch of different options we can go with. I think two-handed axe might be one of the better ones because this is going to increase our damage to vulnerable enemies. Eventually, we're kind of be applying vulnerable to everything we touch, and just doing 15% more damage is really nice. The crit chance doesn't really help us all that much, but I would only recommend using this if you are not using a two-handed sword. Ideally, you would have a two-handed sword in your hand, but if you don't, you should use the two-handed sword aspect. This makes it so that dealing any direct damage you deal is also inflicted as bleeding, and then you deal 30% increased bleeding damage for 5 seconds after killing an enemy. This is super strong as well. You could even possibly go into do one-handed sword aspect for more attack speed, but I think two-handed sword and two-handed axe are probably the best aspects or techniques here you can do. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the aspects. I'm going to hop into the leveling part here. So let's just go to a fresh one. And for every Barbarian leveling build, my first 2 points are always going to be Lunging Strike and Enhanced Lunging Strike. This is basically a instant move across the entire room teleport that does damage and generates fury. It's kind of a no-brainer for leveling. Yes, could you go Flay? Sure, it does do more damage. It helps apply vulnerable, it helps you do more bleed damage. All of those things are true, and if I was in a situation where I wasn't really trying to move quickly, I wasn't trying to like get from point A to point B fast, so like some sort of like difficult capstone dungeon or something, I would consider switching to Flay. However, I think this is kind of overkill for most of the time. So like maybe right before you go into a big boss, you can just like flip-flop between the two, but I think overall Lunging Strike is just too good to not take. Next, take Rend, Enhanced Rend, Furious Rend. Rend does big damage over time. It does 12% instant damage, and then 96% bleeding damage over 5 seconds. Compare that to like any of the other skills, like 17% damage per tick, 50% damage per hit, 70% damage per hit, 36, that turns like to 72% damage. This does so much damage at level 1, it's ridiculous. This Enhanced Rend will make it so that it extends the duration of vulnerable, which is good. We'll have a bunch of vulnerable eventually. And then Furious Rend is kind of the secret sauce of the leveling part of this build. This makes it so that direct damage with Rend grants you Fury per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 20 Fury. Since this thing only costs 35 Fury, you're basically going to be refunding a large portion of your Fury cost, which allows you to do more Rends, which is more damage. Now, once you kind of have your Fury costs all situated and figured out, you can probably go Violent Rend to get even more damage against vulnerable enemies, but especially while you're leveling and before you have like infinite tons of Fury, I would highly recommend doing Furious Rend. And then from there, you're 1 point away from the next tree, so we're just going to put 1 point into Rend, which will allow us to unlock Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry is really good, gives you movement speed, gives you resource regeneration, or generation, and this is just good for you and your team. After that, 3 more points into Rend, just level it up, and then Enhanced Rallying Cry. It's about level 12, where you can probably be up in Skazglen, and you can unlock the Ghost Walker aspect. This is, just making you go faster, so that is a good combination there for sure to have. This then unlocks this part of the tree, the Brawling part, and we're going to go and take Leap and then Warcry. Leap gets us places, allows us to jump up and down ledges and move just all around. It is just a really good movement skill. It allows you to get places that you probably wouldn't think that you would be able to get normally. Highly recommend that. And Warcry gives us damage, which is very good. This gives us Berserking as well, which is more movement speed and damage. So Warcry is a huge cooldown for us. And then we're going to turn Leap into even better by getting Enhanced Sleep, which makes it so if you don't hit anything, you reduce its cooldown. But then with Power Leap, if you do hit something, you get more Fury. Overall, just a great combination of stuff here. And this unlocks the weapon mastery area of the tree. And we're going to take the node that probably every barbarian build is going to take, which is hamstring. This makes so that your bleeding effects now slow enemies, and as slow is a crowd control. So now all of the crowd against enemies that are crowd controlled mods on all 4 of your weapons are activated basically all of the time whenever you're hitting enemies with basically anything. And so this is incredibly strong. This won't work against bosses and the world boss, but very, very good. Highly recommend you go get this. Next, we're going to go Pit Fighter. It gives us more damage, a little bit of DR. Just 1 point here. Slaying Strike, 1 point here. This gives us a little bit more damage against injured enemies. And then Expose Vulnerability. So dealing direct damage with a weapon mastery skill causes your next core skill to make enemies vulnerable. Weapon mastery skills are these 3 here, and our core skill is Rend. So we're going to take Deathblow next, and this pretty much makes it so that if you hit Deathblow, the next Rend will apply vulnerable, and then if you just keep rending, you'll keep pushing that vulnerable out, and it's just very solid. Deathblow itself is very interesting because if you kill an enemy with it, its cooldown is reset, and so it's kind of somewhat easy to just execute little mobs with it. And if there is a boss that's standing kind of next to a small mob, which happens all the time, or an elite, you can just Deathblow both of them. One of them will die, and you get the cooldown back immediately. And then after that, we are going to go and just max out Expose Vulnerability, just so we're really taking advantage of applying that vulnerable to everything. And then the next thing I'm going to recommend is getting Cut to the Bone. Cut to the Bone makes it so that your bleeding effects are amplified against vulnerable targets, and so this is just more damage for the build. It's just a very good multiplier. Then we're going to go back to Deathblow and just finish it out, make it do more damage to bosses, and get Berserking, which is more damage, more move speed. I think you see where we're going here. Next, we're going to go back up to Tactical Rallying Cry. This gives you instant fury and gives you more resource generation. If you're feeling a little bit squishy, you could go Strategic Rallying Cry, which gives you Fortify and gives you Fortify whenever you get hit. But I think that Tactical Rallying Cry is pretty good. And then we are going to go all the way to the top, and we're going to get Battle Lunging Strike, which makes it so that Lunging Strike also inflicts 20% bleeding over 5 seconds. And yeah, this is just a lot of bleeding. This makes this now like a 50% damage basic skill, which is very, very strong. Very, very strong indeed. And then we're going to come down here to the shout nodes. These nodes are very strong. If you're playing a barbarian build at all and you have 2 shouts or more, you probably want to take all 3 of these nodes complete because they're just so good. Booming Voice makes it so that your shout skill durations are increased. Guttural Yell makes it so that enemies that are hit or near your shouts take or do less damage for a short time. But then Raid Leader is ridiculous. This thing is kind of like a little bit misunderstood, but basically your shouts also heal allies for 1% of their maximum life per second, and that's per point. So at level 3, that's going to be 3% of their maximum life per second. And allies means basically any PvP, non-PvP player near you at all. So everybody in your party, yourself, just random people running by, this will affect. Your shouts will help these people. And so, for example, if you're at the world boss and you're just shouting, it's hitting everybody. I really noticed during the server slam when we had 2 or 3 barbarians at the world boss versus having none, it was very noticeable. So we're going to go and take 2 points in this, and just 2 points, because getting this brings us to level 34, which unlocks our key passive. Now, I did do a whole video talking about these. You can check them out in my YouTube channel, but there's a couple of different options. We are getting Berserking, which could help. There is Walking Arsenal, which helps when we're switching weapons. This will double the cost of our Rend, but increases damage significantly. And then Gushing Wounds gives us like basically a bleed crit. Now, this might seem like the way to go, but until we have a lot of crit chance, I don't think that this is particularly good. So what I'm going to go with is Walking Arsenal. This doesn't mess around with our fury cost at all. It doesn't make it harder for us to play the game. There's no drawback. And even if we're only really using 2 weapons, this times 10% for each weapon type we're using multiplies against each other, so it's like a 21% more damage increase. However, if you manage to get 3 weapons going, you are getting like a 56% more damage decrease or increase without having any downside. So this basically will like tear through your fury really quickly. And so until you like really have your fury set up, this is kind of just like less, you get less attacks. So even though you're, doing more damage with those attacks, the like damage per fury is pretty bad. And so that's why I'm recommending Walking Arsenal. Now, when you get Walking Arsenal, you kind of want to set up all your skills. And so I'm not sure how to do it on console, but I think on the PC, if you press S for skills, it pops up a little panel above your skills, and you can go and hover over your skills. Like I could go and hover over Deathblow, and I want to middle mouse click until it goes from auto to two-handed bludgeoning. I'll do two-handed bludgeoning on Deathblow, two-handed bludgeoning on Leap, and then Rend is always going to be a two-handed slashing. We're going to do dual wielding on lunging strike to increase our attack speed. And that is going to allow us to very easily activate Walking Arsenal. We're going to lunge in on the enemy. We're going to death blow them, which will activate our exposed vulnerability when we rend using our slash. And then we just have Walking Arsenal going. You just keep rending, and then you can, rebuild with lunging, and you can even use your leap, or you can use death blow to activate the whole combo again. And this is very, very strong. Another thing to note here with Walking Arsenal, if you don't like Leap or you're like playing like a little bit slower and you don't really need it, you could actually, I believe, eventually, we're not going to have enough points right now, drop Leap entirely and go and pick up Iron Maelstrom here. Iron Maelstrom basically is an ultimate that does huge damage. It covers like the entire screen. If you've seen the Barbarians where they're like spinning all their weapons around and hitting everything, that's Iron Maelstrom. And the reason this is good is not only does it use all 3 weapons, which activates Walking Arsenal for us, it crits and does a lot of damage as well, but every time we switch weapons, we reduce the cooldown of it by 1 second. And so by using so many different weapons, this is going to be up all the time. And so this can help clear like the entire screen out of little monsters, helps you wreck through elites faster, and it's just overall really fun and really fast. So we just picked up Walking Arsenal. The next thing that we want to go do is finish up Raid Leader and then Booming Voice. These 2 are just very, very important to go get. Next, I'm going to go get Swiftness. I'm playing in Softcore, so movement speed is kind of nice. If you are playing in Hardcore, you might want to pick up Guttural Yell here and skip on the Swiftness for now. And then we're going to go back here, get Pit Fighter, increase our damage to close enemies, which are enemies that are like within melee range of us. And then we are going to go back to Warcry and take Mighty Warcry. This gives us a little bit of Fortify just built into the build. So once again, if you wanted to get more Fortify, you could switch from Tactical to Strategic Rallying Cry. But the reason we want Fortify is because we're going to take Thick Skin, which gives us more Fortify. And then we're going to take Counter Offensive. If we have Fortify for more than 50% of our maximum life, we do another 12% more damage, just more big multipliers on our damage. I think that this is very, very solid. We're going to kind of continue the somewhat defensive theme here by getting Imposing Presence, which gives us more max life, and then 3 points in Martial Vigor. This is probably one of the most ridiculous damage reduction nodes in the entire game right now, because it gives you damage reduction against the enemies you care about the most. So elites, this counts as elites, champions, aggressive PvP players, bosses, world bosses. So all the enemies that are going to hit you the hardest are now hitting you less hard. After that, we're going to go finish up Guttural Yell. Makes enemies also do less damage, and this isn't just for you, this is for your entire team. And now we got 4 points remaining. There's a whole bunch of things you could kind of do here. I'm probably going to end up putting points into Leap. You could also go and get Aggressive Resistance if you want more DR. We are getting Berserking from Deathblow and Warcry. You can even go Prolific Fury out there as well. But I'm probably going to put my points into Leap, at least while leveling. And that's pretty much it for the leveling trait. Next, let's go look at the Paragon. So Paragon here, you'll notice that I'm not taking any glyphs, and we're only doing like 1 board. And the idea for this is that this build is going to carry you to the second capstone dungeon, And we don't really know how likely you are to be getting the glyphs that you want, or how easy it's going to be to level them up and really make them effective. So we're really trying to min-max and get all of the juice out of the Paragon board that we can at this level, so we can just be as effective as possible. So we're going to do the cool S shape here through the first starter board to get the damage and the damage. And then we're going to come up here to the Hemorrhage board. Hemorrhage is absolutely ludicrous board for our build. Very solid. Has a legendary node Hemorrhage, which makes it so that enemies that have been affected by your bleeding for 3 or more seconds take 12% increased damage from you. Absolutely insane. This is helping you do more damage to the enemies that you care about doing more damage to the most. Very good node. These rare nodes all give us physical damage over time and physical damage, or just damage in general, basically. Up here, we've got more damage and more damage. So just picking up all of the nodes here. Up here, it's more damage and more damage. So can't complain about this either. And then over here, we have damage reduction from enemies that are bleeding, which is every enemy you're fighting, which is just very, very solid. Now, if you get a strength glyph, you can put it here or in here. Both of these are good 70 strength node options and very easy to go set up. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the build so far. This should get you through the leveling process. It should get you through that World Tier 3 capstone and into World Tier 4. I'm probably going to be playing something maybe similar to this while we're leveling. I'm going to be leveling a group with Gazzy TV and Pauls. They're playing a Necromancer and a Druid, and we're also having a Sork leveling with us as well. We're trying to push for really, really fast level 100 in softcore. And so if you're watching this video and the game's already live, come by the stream, because I'm probably going to be streaming like 30 plus hours straight on the launch day. Hope this helps you out. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, or like I said, come by the stream, because I probably won't be looking at YouTube too much. But thank you for hanging out. We'll see you soon. Have a good time in Sanctuary.